Say NVC New Future Process, Integrated Plan Conflict Transformation System, Initial 112 Scope, Conflict between NVC 0 partners. This document addresses conflict between partners within the organization. We acknowledge that a task of the Implementation Council and NVC 0 will be to address other kinds of conflict, for example between partners and community members. During the transitional period of the organization coming into being, this system will apply to the extent possible, with the understanding that some structural elements might not initially be available. We expect this to be an evolving system, and this is an initial definition of the system rather than a mandate about how things need to continue to be. A number of tasks have been referred to the Implementation Council to complete the actual setting up of the system and plan for its evolution. Purpose of Conflict Transformation System. The purpose of the Conflict Transformation System is to support our capacity to work together effectively and with full vitality. Basic strategies for addressing conflict. 1. Self-support, including self-empathy and other practices for deepening self-connection and integration, and enhancing the availability of inner resources. 2. Personal support by others, including empathic support, conflict coaching, and other practices. 3. Direct dialogue between those involved in a conflict or experiencing tensions. This involves talking together, ideally in person, or possibly virtually. Most people find that email/text message is not a good medium for achieving connection once tensions rise to a significant level. 4. Supported dialogue between those involved, with the involvement of a third sitter who can support the ability of people to hear one another and address the conflict in a mutually satisfying way. This may look like mediation or may involve another format. 1.5. Group conflict transformation processes including other people relevant to addressing JT-pipe circumflex conflict because they are impacted by the conflict or a part of the system that forms the context for the conflict. 2 examples of such strategies include a restorative circle, a process in the spirit of restorative circles which began with the work of Dominique Barter in Brazil. B. Panel, a group of people brought together to support the conflict being transformed, as described in Reinventing Organizations. The details of how this works will need to be evolved. Generally, it will make sense to try strategies that involve fewer people before moving to strategies that involve more people. Finding support for addressing conflict. Many of the basic conflict transformation strategies involve finding someone with willingness and/or skill to serve in a support role, for example, as a conflict coach, mediator, or group conflict transformation process facilitator. Because addressing conflict is integral to working together, having all partners capable of engaging conflict constructively supports effectiveness. At the same time, support from those who may have more experience or resources can be helpful at times. Each weave develops agreements concerning how they intend to support addressing conflict within their weave. Within each weave cluster, subcluster weaves are asked to develop and make known strategies for supporting addressing conflicts within their domain. In particular, community interface weaves, which will likely be organized according to geographic parameters, are asked to develop and make known strategies for supporting addressing conflicts within specific regions. The virtual home will provide a place where partners and weaves can register their availability to provide support related to conflict transformation. To support people who are in conflict, structures will offer easy access to conflict transformation support so that when these structures are activated, there is a weave that will take collective responsibility for ensuring that a responder will make themselves available to support the request, without requiring the requester to make repeated individual requests. The responder to the request will take responsibility for addressing logistics to support any group processes in happening. To defined practices 114 we desire that people be able to experience a degree of predictability and consistency when they request help for conflict transformation. There be room for refining practices, developing new practices, and varying practices to address particular needs. To support predictability and consistency, the virtual home will include a place where there will be descriptions of what is involved in named conflict transformation practices. There might, for example, be descriptions of restorative circles, style A, restorative circles, style B, and conflict panel. These descriptions will be collectively owned and maintained, in keeping with the modified advice process. When an individual or weave or easy access mechanism registers availability to support addressing conflict, the mechanism will allow them to indicate whether support is associated with one or more particular, defined practices. Weaves related to conflict transformation system. The Implementation Council is asked to set up at least one weave with the responsibility to monitor the effectiveness of the conflict transformation system in fulfilling its intended purpose within the organization. Additional weaves can be created as needed to support the system. It may be helpful for a given defined conflict transformation practice to have one or more weaves associated with those who are involved with that practice, to provide mutual support and a context for evolving the practice. Operational agreements. General agreements. Bullet partners agree that when they perceive tension or conflict with other partners, they participate in some form of conflict transformation practice, mediation, restorative circle, etc., until either the conflict is resolved, or a specific strategy has been found that works for everyone about how all parties can remain as partners and cooperate together in the organization. Bullet partners agree to seed connection using conflict transformation approaches when they are aware of conflict among others, and share accountability for identifying the conflict and addressing the conflict. 115 Agreement regarding onboarding. Bullet new partners are oriented to the conflict transformation system as an essential element of the onboarding process. Those who have not had personal experience of a live restorative practice, mediation, restorative circle, and/or other restorative group process, agree to participate in an onboarding training to support shared understanding and inclusion in identifying when a process for transformation could be initiated. Non-mutual decisions. There may be situations where the purpose of the organization and the well-being of its partners is best served by making a decision that does not involve agreement by someone directly impacted by the decision. This might, for example, involve someone being removed from a weave, or as a partner. To support navigating the sort of difficult circumstances that might call for this sort of action, it is important that there be agreements developed concerning how this can occur. This task is a designated Establishing Systems task of the Implementation Council. 116 NVC New Future Process, Integrated Plan Onboarding Process. Initial Introduction. Onboarding is the process by which someone becomes a partner in the organization. Onboarding is a significant process that occurs over a period of time. An effective onboarding process is important because bullet organizations need enough cohesiveness to support people working in ways that are mutually supportive rather than at cross purposes. In a self-managed organization, there is no power over authority to enforce certain ways of doing things. Instead, the system relies on partners understanding, supporting, and collectively evolving an organizational culture and a set of operational agreements (OAs) that help the organization to function as a coherent whole. Bullet. The culture within the organization, and the OAs, are associated with ways of thinking and operating that are likely to be unfamiliar in some ways to most people, even if they are long-time NVC practitioners. In the absence of effective support for doing things the new way, new partners are likely to default to doing things only in the ways that are familiar to them, which could lead to the organization failing to achieve its purpose, or failing to realize its potential. Bullet onboarding is intended to support people new to the organization in being able to honor and contribute to the culture, coherence, and aliveness of the organization. It is intended to support the partners in being effective in collectively serving the evolutionary purpose for which the organization exists. Functions of onboarding. The onboarding process serves two functions. Bullet. The first function is to support those who want to become partners in the organization in becoming equipped to contribute to the organization effectively and in alignment with the intentions and practices of the organization. 1. Bullet. The second function, important and potentially controversial, is filtering, gatekeeping, increasing the likelihood that people will become partners in the organization only if there is a good fit between them and the organization. Stages of becoming a partner. A person becoming a partner goes through a number of stages. Bullet. Prospect might potentially become a partner. Bullet. Partner in training has entered into the process of becoming a partner. Bullet. Partner, provisional, is in the phase of learning on the job what it means to be a partner. Bullet. Partner, full, has completed all aspects of the formal onboarding process and is serving as a partner in the organization. The prospect becomes a partner in training when an existing partner and organizational weave agree to sponsor them to become a partner. A partner in training is not yet a partner, since they may lack important information needed to serve in that role. A partner in training does not have the decision-making authority in the organization as a whole that is granted to partners. They are welcome, however, to participate in organizational weaves in whatever way the weave agrees on. They will have whatever authority within the weave that weave agrees on, except that the partners retain ultimate responsibility for the weave. Partner in trainings are asked to honor the organizational agreements, to the extent that they are able. A partner in training becomes a provisional partner when they have completed the initial onboarding process, which may include meeting certain learning/experiencing and reflection/inner process objectives, and there is mutual agreement that it makes sense for them to take on this role. The general term, partner, includes both provisional and full partners. It is possible that some agreements may distinguish between provisional and full partners. However, unless otherwise specified, agreements concerning partners apply to both provisional and full partners. A provisional partner becomes a full partner when they have functioned as a partner for a period of time, have completed the follow-up onboarding process, and there is mutual agreement that it makes sense for them to take on the role of a full partner. The two stages of onboarding and being a partner reflect a recognition that it is desirable to enable people to get involved as partners relatively quickly, but that fully integrating into the organization inherently takes time. So, one initially becomes a provisional partner. Then, after participating in the life of the organization for a period of time, one may be invited to become a full partner. Note, in some self-managed organizations, once a person is hired, they immediately have full decision-making authority in the organization. Yet, we have chosen to defer this until after initial onboarding happens. This is partially due to a sense that in a largely volunteer-based organization it may take longer for people to become fully integrated and invested in the organization. 118 Criteria for being a partner. It is an implementation task to develop criteria for being a partner. Some aspects of this may be addressed in other portions of the integrated plan. Sponsorship. The path of becoming a partner begins when a prospect has both an onboarding individual sponsor and an sponsoring weave, who agree that they would like to see the prospect become a partner and are willing to provide some support for this process. An individual sponsor is a partner who agrees to support the prospect in moving towards becoming a partner. An sponsoring weave is an organizational weave which agrees to support the prospect in becoming a partner. Most often, there will be an intention that the new partner will participate in this weave, but this need not always be the case. Having an agreement about having sponsors is a strategy to ensure that there is active agreement that a prospect is likely to be a good fit for the organization, and to ensure that a new partner will begin their journey into partnership from a place of connection to people in the organization. Having an agreement about having both an individual and a weave as sponsors is a strategy for engaging both individual and collective responsibility and wisdom in regard to the choice to bring someone into partnership. The sponsoring individual and weave may also have different roles during the onboarding process. A number of ways exist for how sponsorship is initiated. Sometimes the individual sponsor might be identified first, and sometimes the sponsoring weave might be identified first. Sometimes a prospect might approach an individual partner or weave to request sponsorship, and sometimes the partner or weave might approach the prospect. Sponsors are asked to have one or more conversations with the prospect to ensure the prospect's basic alignment with the organization's vision, purpose, mission, other basic cultural elements, and agreements. To assess whether the prospect meets the criteria for partnership, to be defined more fully as an implementation task. And to assess their own enthusiasm and/or willingness to support the prospect in becoming a partner. When a weave decides to sponsor a prospect to become a partner, this is in some ways analogous to making a decision to hire someone into a company, although usually no financial arrangements will be involved. It is a decision to invite someone to co-hold the organization and its purpose, in partnership as a co-worker, with full role in deciding how the organization will function going forward. It is a significant decision, to which we hope weaves will give careful consideration. While there are points in the onboarding process where it might be decided that this isn't working out as we had hoped, the step of deciding on sponsorship is intended to be a significant deciding point where there will be discernment about the likelihood of someone being aligned with the organization and able to contribute effectively. 3. We acknowledge that having an agreement about having sponsorship could reinforce patterns less than circumflex privilege and limit access to participation in the organization. We hope that strategies such as the following might help compensate for this tendency. We hope there will be active outreach to invite into partnership people who are members of groups who historically have experienced reduced access. The section of the virtual home that talks about becoming a partner will include listings of any partners or weaves who have energy for potentially sponsoring people who might not otherwise have easy access to participation, or who are otherwise interested in supporting access. The presence of an access partner in most weaves may help increase awareness about such issues. Only members of the NVC0 community are eligible to become partners in NVCO. Once a member of the NVC0 community has an individual sponsor and a sponsoring weave, and says that they are in full alignment with the vision, purpose, mission, and other basic cultural elements of the organization, and intend to honor its operational agreements, they have become a partner in training. Celebrating this milestone is encouraged. Roles. The process of bringing someone into the role of partner will typically involve the following roles. Prospect/partner in training/provisional partner is the person on the path to becoming a partner. Onboarding individual sponsor is a partner who agrees to support the prospect in moving towards becoming a partner. Sponsoring weave is an organizational weave which agrees to support the prospect in becoming a partner. Most often, there will be an intention that the new partner will participate in this weave, but this need not always be the case. Coordinator is a partner who provides logistical support to help the prospect navigate the onboarding process. Trainer is a partner who supports the prospect in receiving knowledge or experiences that are deemed to be important to the onboarding process. Mentor is a partner who is available to provide advice and support, and who checks in occasionally to see how things are going during the period until the prospect becomes a full partner. Learning/experience. For initial onboarding, it is important that new partners learn about a variety of topics, and, where possible, have their learning grounded in experience. Some important topics include the vision, purpose, mission, and other basic cultural elements of the organization. 120 self-management operational agreements, including significance and content decision-making within weaves and in the organization as a whole. Conflict transformation system and approaches to addressing tensions. Feedback processes and practices. Accessibility and awareness about historic and current patterns of privilege and oppression. Resources, tools, and systems commonly used by partners in working together, including features of the virtual home. Financial systems and practices. How the organization is structured. Practices for running effective meetings. However, at present, there may not be sufficient agreement on these practices to allow this. It will be an implementation task to take the above topics and develop more detailed criteria for what learning objectives are to be addressed by the initial onboarding process. These learning objectives will serve as a reference for partners in training, coordinators, trainers, and for those assessing a partner in training's readiness to become a provisional partner. Example criteria. Partners in training are asked to experience a mediation and a restorative circle, possibly semi-simulated, if they do not have prior experience with these. Partners in training are asked to have a concept of and to have experienced giving and receiving feedback in a manner consistent with NVC, to help ensure a shared understanding around how to offer and receive feedback effectively. It will be important to define the objectives in a way that considers that people may already have substantial knowledge in these areas, while ensuring that partners have shared understandings around these topics. Some of the learning resources associated with onboarding will be made available to prospects as well as to partners in training. This seems likely to be feasible for documents and multimedia online lessons. NVC practice. Having an integrated practice of NVC is an important aspect of being a partner. Achieving this is beyond the scope of the onboarding process itself. However, onboarding will need to include 5 checking in around this, and ensuring that the partner in training meets the criteria related to T-pipe circumflex, or is on a path to doing so. In some places, there may not be many people who have deeply integrated NVC practices, and yet they may want to organize, to be connected to the organization and the global NVC community. We suggest that support be provided for forming a community weave, and that partners offer training in skills that could pave the way towards eventual readiness for partnership in the organization. Reflection/on the process. As the initial onboarding process includes an element of reflection and mental/emotional housekeeping. In particular, those who support the process are asked to support partners in training in 1. Connecting with their personal purpose and dreams, and the relationship of these to the purpose and other basic cultural elements of the organization. 2. Connecting with and mourning, or otherwise attending to, any unhealed emotional wounds in relation to the organization or its partners, or the predecessor organization, (NVC), that could get in the way of wholehearted collaboration within the organization. 3. Reflecting on, and sharing with others, factors that may lead to difficulty or impact their ability to collaborate when difficult situations arise, and strategies for addressing these. Those who develop this onboarding process further are asked to develop documentation to support partners in training and those who support them in addressing this step. Materials associated with the blueprint of we are likely to serve as a good basis for this. Partners are asked to have established practices for self-support and self-responsibility in times of conflict and disagreement. Prospective partners in training are asked to either have such practices or be receiving support for establishing such practices. Consequently, 4. An objective of the initial onboarding process is that it includes self-examination and mutual assessment around this topic. Practices for self-support and self-responsibility in times of conflict and disagreement, and implementation of strategies for addressing any gaps in this regard. Social connectedness onboarding is partially about learning, and it is also about becoming connected to those in the organization at a more human level. This connectedness supports effectiveness in working together. Ideally, a partner in training develops a sense of belonging and knowing and being known, and a feel for the people and the organization. They also begin to develop a web of connections that support addressing issues involving various topics. Various types of events might be held to address this and other needs. Bullet community interface weaves might support regular connection-oriented events to which prospects, partners in training, and others could be invited. 6. Bullet and onboarding support weave might offer a monthly virtual gathering, with virtual circumflex gut rooms, to support small group conversations, and invite partners in training and interested partners to attend and connect to one another. Bullet global and regional gatherings might make special efforts to support connections between prospects and partners in training. Bullet community weavers in the organization may have additional ideas about how to support connections happening. Initial onboarding process. What happens during the initial onboarding process that leads up to provisional partnership will typically include the following. 1. The first step for a partner in training and their individual sponsor is to enroll an O coordinator to assist with the process. Under many circumstances, it will be desirable to have an O coordinator who can meet in person with the prospect. So if there is a local community interface weave that offers O coordination support, this would be a good place to check. Alternatively, onboarding support weaves are asked to publish information about how to find an O coordinator. 2. The O coordinator and the partner in training will typically meet to share information, confirm basic alignment, and lay out the steps that will be involved in the process. 3. The O coordinator and the partner in training will together design a plan for how the partner in training will meet the learning/experiencing and reflection/inner process objectives for onboarding. This may involve a combination of individual learning through reading/multimedia, as well as actual trainings, in person or virtual. In some cases, it may be practical to arrange for a cohort or even just pairs of partners in training to go through some or all of the process together, for mutual support, companionship, and learning. A variety of O trainers might be involved in a partner in training's learning path. 4. The O coordinator and the partner in training will together design a plan to support increasing social connection with those in the organization. 5. The O individual sponsor and or O sponsoring weave might be invited to support the learning or social connection plans in some way. 6. The partner in training follows their training and social connection plans, adjusting as needed with the help of the coordinator. 7. A partner in training is asked to experience at least 5 organizational weave meetings prior to completing their onboarding. Ideally, this will be as a participant, but being in an observer role is sufficient. Some of this may have occurred before becoming a partner in training. 8. The way that learning objectives are addressed is recorded in an onboarding record on the virtual home. 7. 9. At some point during the initial onboarding, the prospect pairs up with an O mentor. Discussion below regarding criteria for taking on this role. 10. When other aspects of the initial onboarding process are completed, a provisional partner readiness meeting is scheduled. The provisional partner readiness meeting involves some preparation by the partner in training, plus a meeting, in person or virtual. All those on the following list are invited to the meeting, and for the meeting to happen, at least 3 others in addition to the partner in training are needed, including at least the O individual sponsor and O mentor, Bullet partner in training, Bullet O individual sponsor, Bullet O mentor, Bullet members of O sponsoring weave, optional, Bullet O coordinator, optional, Bullet O trainers, optional, Bullet members of initial onboarding cohort, if any, optional. The purpose of the readiness meeting is to support learning and to mutually decide whether it makes sense for the partner in training to become a provisional partner at that time. The agreement that at least 3 partners will be involved in the meeting is meant to support the likelihood of diverse perspectives and collective wisdom informing what happens. The agreement that the O individual sponsor and O mentor will be involved is meant to support continuity and depth of connection between the partner in training and people who have a significant role in their onboarding process. Suggested practices. Bullet ask partner in training to reflect and write what they've learned, and how they see themselves as ready to step into the next phase. What their intention is for the next phase, and how they are finding themselves relating to the vision, purpose, mission, and other basic cultural elements of the organization. Bullet review list of learning objectives. Partner in training goes through a self-assessment of where they are in their understanding of each. Bullet the preceding written materials are provided to other meeting participants, who are asked to read these before attending the meeting. Bullet the group will co-create the readiness meeting itself. 8. Bullet the meeting includes feedback from participants to the partner in training, in relation to circumflex TJ&E criteria for partnership and for completion of the initial onboarding process. Bullet the group discusses whether it feels like a fit for the person to become a provisional partner in the organization. Bullet there may be agreement to advance the person to the next phase. Bullet there may be requests regarding what will happen going forward. Bullet if there is a decision not to advance the person, there is specific feedback offered regarding concerns, and the partner in training may work with their own coordinator to develop new learning objectives. In addition, the partner in training is given information about mechanisms for addressing any concerns they may have about the decision not to be welcomed as a provisional partner. Note, it is an implementation task to develop such mechanisms. Duration of initial onboarding. How long the initial onboarding process takes is likely to vary. Bullet in a fast version of the process, the learning and reflection objectives portion of the initial onboarding process could potentially be addressed in a 3-day weekend training. Or some of the learning modules might be addressed in an expedited way due to prior experience, covering only what is new. Perhaps in some cases the entire initially onboarding process could be gotten through in as little as a week. Bullet more often, the process is likely to take a number of months. Note that it need not be a barrier to a partner in training being active in the organization, if their onboarding takes a significant period of time. They are still welcome to be active in one or more organizational weaves, and to take actions to influence the organization on a broader level, although organizational level decisions will ultimately be made by partners. Follow-up onboarding process. The follow-up onboarding process supports a person through the stage of being a provisional partner, and addresses their becoming a full partner. This is primarily a process of learning to be a partner by acting as a partner. Some extra support is offered during this stage. There is also some extra checking in, and some extra attention is given to feedback. During the period of being a provisional partner, the mentor is available to be consulted with, and is asked to check in from time to time to see how things are going. Ideally, there will be opportunities for provisional partners to find support through things like an email forum for provisional partners, or weaves whose purpose is to help their members flourish as partners, or mechanisms for helping connect with peer support, etc. 9. The follow-up onboarding period lasts at least 9 months or 10 organizational weave meetings, whichever is greater. When the follow-up onboarding period is complete, a follow-up onboarding readiness meeting is scheduled with the help of an coordinator. All of the following are invited to participate in the associated process and meeting, and at least 4 other people besides the provisional partner are needed. Bullet provisional partner. Bullet O mentor. Bullet members of weaved pages has participated in at least 2 people. Bullet O individual sponsor optional. Bullet members of O sponsoring weave optional. The purpose of the readiness meeting is to support learning and to mutually decide whether it makes sense for the provisional partner to become a full partner at that time. The agreement that at least 4 partners in addition to the provisional partner will be involved in the meeting is meant to support the likelihood of diverse perspectives and collective wisdom informing what happens. The agreement that the mentor and at least 2 members of weaves the provisional partner has participated in will be involved is meant to ensure that feedback will be available from people who have direct experience of the provisional partner during the follow-up onboarding period. Suggested practices. Bullet ask provisional partner to reflect and write what they've learned, and how they see themselves as ready to step into the next phase. What their intention is for the next phase, and how they are finding themselves relating to the vision, purpose, mission, and other basic cultural elements of the organization. Bullet the preceding written materials are provided to other meeting participants, who are asked to read these before attending the meeting. Bullet the group will co-create the readiness meeting itself. Bullet the meeting includes feedback from participants to the provisional partner, in relation to the criteria for partnership. Bullet the group discusses whether it feels like a fit for the person to become a full partner in the organization. Bullet there may be agreement to advance the person to the next phase. Bullet there may be requests regarding what will happen going forward. 10. Bullet if there is a decision not to advance the person, there is specific feedback offered regarding circumflex concerns, and the provisional partner may work with their own coordinator to develop new learning objectives. Bullet in addition, the provisional partner is given information about mechanisms for addressing any concerns they may have about the decision not to be welcomed as a full partner. Note, It is an implementation task to develop such mechanisms. Evolution of this process. It is understood that the process laid out here is likely to be evolved and refined, perhaps even before it is ever put into practice as described here. How people take on roles related to onboarding. Partner roles that relate to the onboarding process include O individual sponsor, O coordinator, O trainer, and O mentor. Only partners are invited to take on any of these roles. There is no expectation that different people will serve on these roles. In theory, one partner could be the O sponsor, O coordinator, O trainer, and O mentor for an incoming partner throughout their onboarding process. There will be a transitional period during which the criteria for taking on roles will be different in a manner that can be decided by the Implementation Council or Global Council, because there will not initially be full partners to help bring others on board. Once enough full members exist overall in NVCO, the following additional criteria apply beyond being a partner. O individual sponsor may or may not be a member of the O sponsoring weave. O sponsoring weave, a weave with at least 3 full partners. The agreement that there will be at least 3 full partners involved is intended to support the likelihood of collective wisdom and multiple perspectives, in addition to a depth of knowledge about the organization, being involved in the decision-making. O coordinators and O trainers. 1. Participation in an O coordinators or trainers weave respectively. Reason: to support collective wisdom emerging, and so that O coordinating and training practices became collectively held rather than purely individual. 2. Strong intention to be guided by the purpose of the organization and the purpose of the onboarding process, and to honor any operational agreements with respect to the onboarding process. O coordinator. 1. Participation in a community interface weave. Reason: since contributing to in-person connection is an important aspiration of the onboarding process. Note: O individual sponsors and O mentors may choose to form and or join weaves focused on these roles. However, no particular reason exists to have such participation in such a weave be a criterion for taking on these roles. 11. Like every other specialized role within NVCO, all of the above roles need to have criteria for feedback, see feedback system, as well as specific processes for offering feedback about how the roles are performed that rely on a uniform mechanism available throughout the organization. Developing the criteria and the processes is a task left to the Implementation Council or to the weaves related to these roles, or to those who have energy to do so, in keeping with the modified advice process. Operational agreements, including ones derived from this document during the implementation phase, may specify certain aspects of how onboarding will be done, and other aspects may be left to the discretion of those self-managing the process. The relevant OAs may be evolved in the same manner as any other OA. It may be that individual partners or weaves will take responsibility for producing social connection events to support the onboarding process. Evolution of this process. It is understood that the process laid out here is likely to be evolved and refined, perhaps even before it is ever put into practice as described here. References. One useful reference to consider while evolving the onboarding process is the Reinventing Organizations Wiki. One seemingly important piece of advice from this wiki is that the best way to avoid disruptive tensions is to have a steady intake of new colleagues and avoid very large groups of new people starting at once. Participants in organizational weaves. Those who participate in an organizational weave will have one of these statuses: bullet partner, provisional or full. Partners co-hold responsibility for decision-making, and for the weave and the organization serving their purposes. Bullet partner in training, someone on the path to becoming a partner, has whatever authority the partners in the weave agree to, and partners retain ultimate responsibility for the actions of the weave. Bullet guest, someone who participates in an organizational weave, but is not a partner, is a guest. A guest might be someone invited to participate in the weave in an advisory role. 12. CNVC New Future Process, Integrated Plan 128. From current CNVC to self-managing weaves. Current status. This part of the integrated plan is still being worked on by the CNVC Transition Task Force of the Integration Council. Unlike other parts of the plan, which are blueprints for what's anticipated for after the Implementation Council begins its work, or substantially later, this part of the plan is a living document and an ongoing process. Some of our decisions have an immediate effect on CNVC's operations. For example, our task force intends to continue to meet during the months leading up to the establishment of the Implementation Council, for at least the following purposes. 1. Complete some areas of the plan that have not yet reached full maturity, specifically, the legalities and complexities associated with board transition in particular, as well as questions related to the CNVC budget and CNVC's solvency. 2. Deal with ongoing questions and scenarios that arise, such as discussing together any new expenses beyond certain numbers that CNVC might incur before the transition, as these may affect the amount of money in the reserve fund that is currently designated for NVCO. The schedule of meetings for this as any other part of the new future process is available and open to the public through the future page on the CNVC website. Important links: meeting notes of this CNVC Transition Task Force agenda, principles for the operation of the Task Force. 1. Aim for collaboration in all decisions regardless of who has ultimate authority for the specific decision. 2. Any decisions about what will happen prior to the formal ratification of the integrated plan are made by CNVC board and staff reps, with Integration Council reps in an advisory role, although full collaboration is sought in each decision. 3. Any decisions about what will happen after the integrated plan is ratified, when the Implementation Council starts operating, currently anticipated to happen October 6, 2016, are made by the Integration Council reps to the task force as strong recommendations to be 129 ratified by the Integration Council as a whole, with CNVC board and staff reps in an advisory role, although full collaboration is sought in each decision. Principles about the product of this task force. 1. Impact the existing functionality as little as possible, unless there is a strategic reason to do so. 2. Support organic movement into full self-management based on NVC 0 approach. 3. Focus on functional sustainability rather than organizational or staff sustainability. 4. Align means and ends. The process of transitioning is aligned with the end result being self-managing weaves fully integrated into NVC 0. 5. Use relationships more than legalities to attend to transitional issues, E.S.P. related to NTS. 6. Use CNVC excess revenue to fund NVC 0 until the transition is complete. 7. Make decisions based on full understanding of data. 8. Aim for function sustainability, not overall organizational sustainability. Context: this transition plan is primarily for the period after the Integration Council has ratified the final integrated plan, currently planned for September 2016, and the Implementation Council begins its work, currently planned for October 6, 2016. If the time frame for feedback from the community changes, those dates may change. Some decisions below apply to the period leading up to the formal transition. Note: the CNVC Transition Task Force is still in the process of receiving and investigating financial data. The plan as it stands is based on the premise that CNVC is solvent and can continue to operate based on current income without dipping into its reserve fund, which is designated for supporting NVC 0 in getting started, and especially in creating the virtual home. If the analysis of data leads to a different conclusion, the plan may need to be amended. Decisions beginning now and until transition is complete. 1. During the transition, CNVC will make financial projections available on a website or equivalent for all to see on a quarterly basis. Until Implementation Council begins its work. 1. Establish a task force to investigate the legal options for moving forward, Bob and Ellen, and report to the entire task force and to the Implementation Council as needed. As with any other financial expenditure, if the cost is more than $2,000, the task force will be involved. 2. Starting from when the transition plan is finished and until the Implementation Council begins its work, currently planned for October 6, 2016, the CNVC Transition Task Force will continue to 130 to meet as needed for coordination and tending to issues that come up as CNVC begins to move towards the transition. 3. Hiring policy until the transition, currently scheduled for October 6, 2016. Criteria for when to bring to this task force for feedback/advice with high regard. A. If it's someone who is involved with the NFP and the anticipated compensation will exceed $1,000. B. If it's anyone else who is not involved with the NFP, only when the anticipated compensation exceeds $2,000 after the Implementation Council begins its work. 1. Starting when the Implementation Council begins its work, currently planned for October 6, 2016. There will be a bi-weekly meeting between Implementation Council and CNVC, made up of 1 Implementation Council member, 1 staff member, and 1 existing board member. A. Purpose: to collaborate on financial and other decisions that go beyond daily operations. B. Once meetings start, the Implementation Council reaffirms, each time, the intention to support the staff/board in doing their work autonomously, while the staff and board members reaffirm their intention to be flexible and supportive. In both cases, this is part of attending to past pain in both directions. NVC transitional configuration. The logical structure of NVC 0 will be supported by an underlying legal structure, involving one or more incorporated legal entities. Understanding this is relevant to understanding the planned transition for CNVC. As the new future process enters the implementation phase, currently planned for October 6, 2016, CNVC will organize itself into a transitional configuration described as follows. The transition to this configuration is to be done as conditions allow, with a timetable to be decided by the Implementation Council in consultation with CNVC staff and board. Conceptual framework. CNVC conceptually becomes one of the legal entities supporting the logical structure of the new organization, NVCO. 1. Work done by the CNVC legal entity will be considered a subset of the work done by NVCO, the logical, global organization. 2. Work done within CNVC will be done in a manner subject to the operational agreements (OAs) adopted within NVCO. 3. CNVC will be organized into weaves based on the functions delineated below. 4. Each weave will function in accordance with the self-management principles associated with the organizational weaves within NVCO. 5. CNVC will transition to a new board, also known as the CNVC governance weave, with new membership and a new understanding of its role as below. 6. Everyone at CNVC, board and staff, will be considered transitional partners in NVCO, since the full infrastructure for a full onboarding process will likely not be available during the transition. At some time, decided by the Implementation Council, once enough infrastructure is in place, transitional partners will be required to go through a regular onboarding process in order to continue acting as partners. See more in the document linked PF2 NVC0 Transitional Partners. Functions and weaves. Overall principles. 1. CNVC will continue its functions for now unless there is a specific strategic reason to change it or until some other weave forms that is able to handle such functions. Over time, either certain weaves within CNVC will become fully fledged NVCO weaves, and/or some functions will move to non-CNVC weaves. 2. Each of the weaves below, with the exception of the subcluster weave, will attend to as many of the financial, budgeting, hour, and other centralized functions as is consistent with its operation and with organizational efficiency. 3. Each of the new weaves is free to invite new partners as part of its self-management operation when its members have gone through the onboarding process and become full partners themselves. Handling CNVC's current functions during the transition. The transition is designed to last up to 2 years after the Implementation Council starts operating. 1. NT weave. Managing the offering of NTS. CNVC will continue to manage NTS as currently until and unless someone wants to take it elsewhere, at which point a study will be conducted to assess the viability of attending to administration of NTS elsewhere. B. Note to Implementation Council. Consider how leaving it up to individual weaves perpetuates the habit of having it all centralized in the USC. CNVC staff, Ellen, future years NTS, Danielle, current year NTS, and Janet, Lee Labs /R. Invoicing, and also Teresa and Dali, phone support. Pan supports with website-related items, and Richard with bookkeeping. 4D. Also, NT resource teamy. Also, one organizer or two per NT, and the NT trainer team, and translators for ILFs 2 that are translator deaf. Tasks, central entity that manages, evolves, supports and tracks the offering of NTS as a strategy to share, inspire and deepen NVC practice throughout the world, support NVC community building, and to maintain financial sustainability for CNVCG. Also, fundraising, marketing too. Certification Administration Weave, which would collaborate with other weaves within NVC0 that relate to certification/recognized roles. CNVC will continue to subsidize this function until the new recognized role system is able to be administratively self-sustaining. B. CNVC staff, Allison C. Also, Educational Services Team. Certification Coordinating Council D. Handling the administrative aspects of certification, responding to general certification inquiries by email and phone, including website assistance. Registering candidates and supporting them throughout the CNVC registration process. Liaison between CNVC and the assessor teams, including administrative support for the Educational Services Team meetings. Collaboration and communication with candidates ready for announcement as certified trainers. Announcements to the community of all new CNVC certified trainers. Maintenance and update of all information/records pertaining to CNVC candidates, trainers and assessors. E. Support for assessors, trainers and certification candidates, as well as the general NVC. Community 3. The existing commons, which would handle bookkeeping, human resources, website maintenance, and any other practical operational functions. AC NVC, Teresa, Alison, Danielle, Janet, Pan, Richard and Ellen B. Existing CNVC website functions. I. Help people find each other on the website, finding trainings, support people who don't know anything, find trainers, support assessors. 2. Support for trainers. 1. Allow certified trainers to share their experiences. 25% do this. 2. Trainer education. 5. 3. Sign up for trainings tools, supporting the trainer. 3. 133. 4. Support promoting events for trainers and local people who want to learn about NVC, at a target audience in a region. 5. Request a trainer program resource database for policy, organization structure, certification material. 4. Applications for workflow automation, for example anti-applications VLabs product, highly focused learning event where people will share handouts, best practices. 6. Information hub upon request. A place where people can go to get information, a centralized location to input and receive information. 7. Space for connection and collaboration, shared information, such as open board meetings, open NT resource team meetings, open NFPI, meetings, etc. A place where current functions are visible to and accessible to community. C. Responding to public inquiries and / refer to other weaves, Teresa and Alison. D. Managing the archive. Capturing the history of NVCF. Bookstore. If this function is continued, I. Say NVC will continue to hold the function of the bookstore, outsourcing shipping. 2. 3. And ordering. As soon as onboarding exists and a weave can be formed, Teresa is invited to seed a weave, whose task it is to develop distribution all over the world. Staff: Teresa, bookstore manager, and Alison, bookstore support. Supported by Janet, /R, and Richard, bookkeeping, and Pan, website support. Note: CNVC is transitioning to Shopify to streamline the front and back end of the online bookstore, and working on moving to drop shipping rather than manually packing and sending packages. 4. Develop and evolve abilities of trainers to have materials available through bookstore, to be reachable and visible to more people. Develop alternative ways to share this material, such as downloadable, electronic formats, manage and reorder materials, manage inventory, customer support, pack and ship. 6. Also, marketing. 4. Legal compliance weave, overhead functions as needed to comply with legal and practical requirements. Ellen, Richard, Teresa. 6. 5. Say NVC governance weave, to fulfill the legal requirement of a board. The CNVC governance weave board will have 5 members. The membership will include I. 1 representative selected by and from the current CNVC board. 2. 1 representative selected by and from the CNVC staff. 3. 3 representatives selected by the NVC0 Global Council, or by organizational weaves to whom the Global Council delegates the selection of a representative. If the Global Council does not yet exist, the Implementation Council will manage these selections. B. The new governance weave will begin operating as soon as the Implementation Council is ready for it to do so. C. The CNVC governance weave will seek to care for what is legally required of a board while limiting its role to tasks consistent with the principles of self-management. This may require research into how boards work in other organizations that have embraced self-management. The transition to self-management within CNVC might not become complete until NVC0 has developed a set of operational agreements and infrastructure to facilitate self-management, and partners within CNVC have received relevant training. D. This board, with the exception of inability to serve, will stay in effect until the transition is fully completed and all functions currently held by CNVC are now in the hands of fully onboarded weaves, and no later than 2 years from beginning to implement this plan. E. If the Implementation Council decides to maintain a non-profit, US-based organization, then all subsequent board selections will be based on new considerations to be decided by the Implementation Council or the Global Council if it's already established. F. Say NVC will amend its bylaws to reflect this new way of functioning. 6. CNVC subcluster weave includes representatives of the above weaves, or possibly all members of those weaves as each weave chooses, and offers a forum for coordinating the activities of those weaves, albeit not in a top-down directive fashion, but as a support for and adjunct to self-management, a financial oversight. budgeting/planning through the transition, bookkeeping, accounts receivables, accounts payables. Ellen, Richard, Janet, most of this distributed among individual weaves. 7b. Other internal maintenance procedures such as our Ellen, payroll, Teresa, Richard. 1. 3. ETF development. Ellen, office maintenance, Teresa. IT technical support for internal users. Ellen, PAN, maintaining and upgrading software. Ellen, PAN. Current CNVC's functions that will be phased out and reasons. 1. Use, not sustainable. 2. Physical presence, unsure of the purpose of this function, depends on the purpose of CNVC. Weaves. 3. Sharing information, active, such as the board president's letter to community updating on activities of past year and future, updates from the NFP teams, updates from CNVC staff such as the letter last July. This will now be done by each weave without central oversight, allowing any future central communications weaves to emerge organically based on need and willingness. Current functions that will be referred to the Implementation Council, also called Transitional Global Council. 1. Hub function that receives inquiries from potential partners about projects. 2. Hub function that also ties members of the global NVC network together, somewhere for people in the community to go to express concern, celebration, suggestions, etc. 3. Initiate collaboration with or respond to collaboration requests from others in community or similar-minded organizations, such as the recent exploration with the International Peace Foundation. Track and nurture possibilities for inclusion of community members, such as the letter from NT Department in 2013 inviting all trainers to speak their interest in NTS, in other words community building. Miscellaneous. 1. Fundraising. CNVC doesn't currently have a fundraising function. In the event that CNVC manages to set up a fundraising function before the transition begins, that function is anticipated to become the seed of a new NVC0 fundraising weave. Finance's overall principle, to operate CNVC with as much excess revenue as possible available to seed NVC0 functionality. This means, in particular, an ongoing conscious intention to reduce costs and to focus only on the necessary functionality of CNVC until the transition is complete. 1. Regarding technicalities of fund management, CNVC will transfer its financial assets, savings and investments equivalent to $310,000 as of March 30 to an NVC0 Legacy Reserves Fund, except for any assets it cannot legally make available for this use, and except for reserves sufficient to address anticipated cash flow needs during the next 12 months. B. CNVC will designate net profits as below to go to an NVC0 Core Revenues Fund. 8c. These two funds, NVC0 Legacy Reserves and NVC0 Core Revenues, will initially correspond to bookkeeping designations for monies remaining in CNVC accounts. D. When the Implementation Council has created other ways for these funds to be managed and or transferred, then it will do so. 2. With regards to the Reserve Fund, the following principles apply. A. Once the Implementation Council is operating, there is an overarching priority given to the new. B. Effort is made to maintain surplus for CNVC and not to dip into the reserve fund. If there is any dipping into the reserve, it is done in collaboration between CNVC board/staff and the Implementation Council. C. Starting now, fundraising is going into a restricted fund for NVCO, most especially towards the building of the virtual home. 3. In thinking about how to maintain and allocate the reserve fund, CNVC board/staff and Implementation Council will consider the following elements in support of sustainability. A. An operating reserve equal to 3 months of CNVC's normal operating expenses relative to its primary activities and T's, certification administration, stewarding our common resources, and legal compliance. B. An NT project reserve equal to the historic cost needed to successfully initiate and carry through with producing the NT scheduled worldwide. Such funds will be in proportion to the number of NTs scheduled and based on those scheduled through the end of the transition period, currently scheduled to be October 6, 2016. C. A contingency reserve equal to $10,000 for. Regarding trainer fees during the transition, CNVC will continue requesting trainer fees for 1 more year, 2016, to be paid in 2017, when inviting trainer contributions in the period prior to the activation of the Implementation Council. Trainers may assign their contributions to one of the following categories. I. New organization, for use in launching the new organization. 2. CNVC, for use in supporting existing CNVC operations as needed. with an understanding that any surplus will eventually flow into supporting the new organization. 3. Open, for either of the above. B. The Implementation Council will decide beyond that either to continue the system or have a clear plan for phasing it out and ask partners and members to contribute as they are able and willing, recognizing that some partners will give money to NVC DF7, some will have no money exchanged with NVCO, and some partners will receive money from NVC0 to be able to focus their energies on contributing to NVC0 in other ways. 5. Regarding NTs, A as the major source of revenue, NTs will be managed to generate sufficient revenue to support the transitional CNVC organization. B. Income from fee-for-service activities. NTs for now will be used to cover the direct and necessary costs of operating the NTS, any deficit in the certification administration until the new recognized roles system is up and running, and the minimally necessary functionality of the website. Excess profit will be made available to NVCO. 6. Regarding donations, A. Donations to CNVC, including any trainer donations, will go to the NVC0 Core Revenues Fund, unless designated for a use associated with one of CNVC's functions, for example, NT tuition assistance, or unless within an amount budgeted in advance as necessary to cover CNVC operating costs. B. Say NVC will act as a fiscal sponsor of NVC0, which will be considered a project of CNVC until alternate arrangements are made with the Implementation Council or other NVC0 weaves. Say NVC data that informed this plan. CTS CNVC records maintain 472 trainers with the role of certified trainer. Thereof, 185 trainers have completed a trainer agreement for 2016. Court fees. 95 of the 185 trainers have paid a trainer's fee. Total fees collected May 20, 2016, $46,452. Court candidates during 2016 up to May 15 candidates have paid certification fee, totaling $3,735. ND's budget 2016 v. 29.05.161. Note: the expenses noted are only direct costs before staffing. The full analysis appears in the full budget. Revenue, $783,000. Direct expenses, $475,000. Surplus, $309,000. Budget, books or sales Q1, 10. Note: the expenses noted are only direct costs before staffing. The full analysis appears in the full budget. Sales, $13,944.95. Costs goods plus expenditure, $6,165.79. Net, $7,779.16. Goods in stock, approx 5,000 items. Book value approx $20,000. Net income CNVC, dollar, as of May 20, 2016. 2014-2015 Q 12,016 minus $224,997 minus $218,423 $64,446 CNVC budget as of June 14, 2016. The 2016 budget for CNVC shows a net revenue of $7,864. The detailed budget, divided in the weaved structure presented above, is here. Miscellaneous other CNVC data, dollar, equity $543,103, operating account $219,933, Wells Fargo $370,428, additional documents with more CNVC data, CNVC profit and loss 2016 Q1 CNVC balance sheet 2016 Q1 considerations about board transition. The CNVC Transition Task Force is not complete, deciding detailed recommendations to send the Integration Council the transition from the current configuration to the new one with the Implementation Council as the main authority. Our plan is to continue to meet during this transitional time, currently estimated to be between now and October 6, 2016, until we reach clarity about this topic. Once we are complete, we plan to send any changes and additions to the Integration Council for their high-threshold concerns, and get their full approval or any remaining high-threshold concerns at the September Integration Council meeting. Some of the issues being addressed are 11-139, 1. What is the best way to support careful attention to the existing organization, CNVC, at the same time as attending to the task of implementing the integrated plan and creating and nurturing the new organization? 2. Legal considerations regarding the functioning of boards, non-profit entities, and self-management. 3. A related question about how to align the moral authority of the Implementation Council with the legal realities of a non-profit entity currently governed by the existing NVC board. 4. Reaching clarity regarding the relationship between the new paradigm of trust, collaboration, and self-management reflected in all NVC 0 functions, and the board's integrity with their fiduciary responsibilities as required by 501 C3 board members. 5. Having sufficient autonomy for the Implementation Council and deciding how it wants to attend to the transition decision. The Implementation Council is requested to meet during the transition time in order to attend to questions of board transition, including selecting their 3 members for the new governance weave or making decisions